Hi, I'm Corinne, and this is Free Press Fail. Happy Friday, here with John Burnett, and we were going to discuss the release of the Mar-a-Lago affidavit, but it looks like they didn't leave us anything to discuss, John.
Yeah, there's more toner, right, used than actual words that you could read. I understand their rationale behind it, but we just expected a little bit more. Why? Because there's still a lot of questions that are unanswered.
Yeah, and I think the order that required them to even release this affidavit said, you know, it is in the public's interest to understand why the political opponent of the current president, why their estate would be raided. And it looks like the FBI said, yeah, we don't care about that. Because they did not give anything to the public here. Really redacted. I just saw a favorite tweet from one of my favorite Free Press Fail contributors that said, is this enough ink, enough darkness for the Washington Post to be worried about democracy?
Exactly.
Democracy in darkness, but that's all we got from the affidavit. Pretty crazy. But I thought this was an interesting thing to come out the same week that Mark Zuckerberg went on Joe Rogan and he started telling us, admitting that the reason that they were censoring conservative posts in 2020 is because the FBI actually reached out directly to Facebook to tell them to do that.
Well, you know, the thing is, that was talked a little bit about. We talked a little bit about that topic on some other stations earlier today. Apparently, I don't know if it's in writing or unwritten rule, but the FBI does not like to get involved 90 days before an election, right? So if there's an investigation, they try to keep it quiet within 90 days of an election, and then afterwards, you know, it's fair game. So if that is an unwritten rule or codified in policy, isn't it interesting that this raid took place exactly 90 days before the midterm elections?
Now they don't
if
have.
It would have went one more day, it would have been 89 days, right? So I find that very interesting. I think it was Dick Morris that actually not broke the news, but introduced that thought, and for us to actually contemplate in terms of the FBI strategy. And if that is part of their motive, to say, you know what? Well, if we do it on the 90th day, right, that gives, so no one can say that we tried to influence the election, even though we're still talking about it within that 90-day window. It's complete hypocrisy.
Yeah, I think that's like something that we have been seeing on all fronts, where I think, you know, if you want to talk about democracy under attack, like we've mentioned, it's like the media plays their role. They spread this narrative, and social media apparently censors stories like no tomorrow. And also the FBI influences both of those things so that they spread a certain narrative also. And it feels a little, not just a little, it feels a lot deceptive and anti-democracy when, you know, the people do not feel like their interests are being represented here. They're not being represented by the FBI, and then the FBI's talking points are regurgitated by the media or censored by social media. And I know we just hear so much hysteria about protecting democracy, but hey guys, we feel a little attacked here. The democracy feels a little attacked by you.
You know, isn't it interesting that every level of law enforcement in this country is subjected to a check and balance, as they should, right? We should have checks and balances throughout our entire system. But the FBI is the only one that seemingly goes unchecked.
For too long, perhaps, is what we're learning now. I think people are getting a little.
They're the enforcement arm of the deep state.
Mm-hmm. They absolutely have made that clear with 2016, investigating Trump in 2016, and this raid in 2020.
2016, 17, 18, yeah. 19, 20, 21, 22, and beyond.
Yeah, it is getting wild. And actually another story this week that involves, you know, FBI corruption is this Ashley Biden diary. 2 people were actually, I think, in New York, John. 2 people were charged with stealing the diary on some like crazy. It's like interstate. The reason was FBI jurisdiction because it was like they were in Florida and they brought the diary to New York to sell it. And they're saying it was stolen property and that's why it was the FBI's case. But they didn't steal it. She actually left it at rehab and these people found the diary. And the FBI pursued it enough to press charges, which to me validates that it's real. Because had they left it alone, I would have said, how do you know if it's hers? I'm never going to believe that. But the FBI thinks it's hers. So now at least I have that endorsement of the legitimacy of this diary. But of course, all the headlines about it, which are not enough, were just a couple charged with stealing Ashley Biden's diary. And not that like Ashley Biden wrote about taking showers with her dad and that she felt sexualized at a young age and that, you know, she has a weird relationship with her father, who is the president of the United States. I'm not going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about how the FBI made sure.
How old was she when she was taking showers with her dad? Like, what the hell?
Yeah, so she said she was old enough to remember, which I think would be too old. But I think she alleges that this was happening when she was like 9 to 12.
Oh my God.
It's way too old. But I'm like, basically, if you can remember it, that was too old.
He's president, groomer in chief.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting. And I think they could have dismissed the story as like, this is fake news. She didn't write that. But the FBI's pursuit of the diary makes it seem like she did write it. And I don't know how they expect us to believe both things, like, oh, it was fake, but also the FBI had to charge these people with stealing the president's daughter's property.
There's a lot of stuff going on with this family. And, you know, I'm not surprised that Hunter's messed up in the head. Who knows what family secrets and anomalies that he is dealing with in his own personal life.
Yeah, I think that's become clear. And so many of us have had struggles, I'm sure family members or ourselves, with addiction. And there's so much sympathy for what Hunter and Ashley are dealing with. But when you have 2 kids who had all of the privilege in the world struggle so deeply with addiction, you do start to wonder, like, what was going on in that house? Like, someone has to say, maybe Joe Biden is not a good dad.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that we can question in the past, as well as what's going on right now, not only with the Biden family, but also the Hunter laptop, as well as, you know, what role did Biden play in all of this in terms of the FBI raid? You know, they're saying that, oh, he wasn't given a heads up with regard to the FBI raid. Now, you got to be really careful with these Democrats, right? Because they really know how to use words. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he may not have been given a heads up as to when the FBI raid would take place, but given the fact that he waived presidential, you know, privilege and so forth with regard to classified information, he knew that a raid was forthcoming. That is the point, right? We can't disconnect those 2 things. So if he waives President Trump's executive privilege, that's connected to the investigation, which is connected to the FBI raid. So he knew.
Oh, he absolutely knew. But I love this because you're right. Democrats are so good with words, but they do this all the time. And Obama used to do this all the time. Oh, I didn't hear about that. I read it in the news. I read it when you just told me about it. It's like, I hate that. It is like blaming the intern when something goes wrong. You are either admitting total incompetency, that you have no control over your own branch of government, that the FBI is acting without the authority of the executive office. They're just acting on their own. It's basically a coup. Poor Joe Biden. He didn't even see this coming. Or he's lying. So you have to be incompetent or a liar. I don't understand why you're setting up that. It's a lot either way. Yeah, in Biden's case, it's definitely both.
So here's the thing, though, right? They could get away with it in this modern time of fake news, right? The way media handles interviews and investigative reporting. But going back decades ago, right? Those that truly embrace the role of being a journalist, there's no way that they can dance around those words, right?
Oh yeah.
It's crazy. It reminds me of President Clinton when he said, "Well, it all depends upon what the definition of is," right? I mean, like that's when they want to break out Webster and go by definitions, right? And not connotation. They get really deep in the nuance, right? And when they start pivoting to legalities and how words are defined, then there's a cover-up.
Oh yeah, and it always is a cover-up, because if it's not pivoting, then they're just actually changing the literal definition of a word. It's not a recession. It's not sex. It's not gender. Whatever. They change the definition whenever it is appropriate, or they just walk around it, dance around it, just like you said. But it is somehow more insulting to me than even in the Clinton era, because these people act as if video evidence doesn't exist, that we haven't seen. Like, we didn't keep receipts of all the times that Biden said this and all of the times that Nancy Pelosi said this. They're like, oh, I've never heard of that before.
Like, we're in the state of mind control, right? That's why they issue the talking points, and the same talking points in the narrative is repeated over and over and over again, to the point where people start questioning, well, maybe we're not in a recession. Maybe there is a new definition of recession, right? Or maybe there is a new definition of man and woman, or maybe there is a new whatever, right? So they're really good at redefining, changing vocabulary, changing meaning, and drilling the message into the mainstream media, right? That actually begins to question your own logic and reasoning. If you're not a strong mind and a strong-willed person, then people do start changing and adapting.
Yeah, I absolutely think that is the goal. It's to make you feel like the thoughts in your head, you're the only one thinking that. Everyone else is on board with the idea that this is not a recession and there are 800 genders, and you can never say that things are true and things are not true. And if you're thinking that, then like you're the bigot, you're the homophobe, you're the sexist. Like, you start thinking it in your own head, because you're like, everybody in the world thinks this other thing, and I think something else. I must be wrong, because I'm overwhelmed by the narrative. And I think that's why conservative media is so important, to question the mainstream, to remind people that you are not thinking this thing alone. A lot of people are thinking that. And even if you were alone, it's okay to think differently than the mainstream about something. As long as you're not hurting anyone, you can think your weird thing whenever you want.
When you mix a little truth with lies, it's called deception. And that's exactly what the Democrats are doing and have done. And when you look at, I hate to bring, a biblical reference, that's what happened in the Garden of Eden, right? Mixing a little truth with lies, right? To cause a person to think exactly the way you want them to think and lead them down the road that you want them to travel.
Completely agree. And it is such a useful tool in politics on both sides. And I mean, even this week, student loan forgiveness has been talked to death, but I see this narrative emerging that if you are not for the student loan forgiveness, who you should be mad at is the people taking the money. And people are buying it and starting to like turn on people that are getting student loan forgiveness. And it's just another manipulation tool, because if you're mad at that policy, be mad at the people who made the policy. Why would you turn on your fellow American who didn't even ask for it?
They're making an economic decision. They're not leaving 10 to 20 grand on the table if they're eligible. So that makes complete sense. In the business terms, again, we call that an economic decision. So to your point, it's it's the people that actually came up with the policy and how it works. And I think they came up with the policy not only to buy votes, right, heading into a midterm election, but at the same time use it for 2024 and get what? The youth involved in voting and their parents that also receive a reprieve to some extent by virtue of backing their students. But possibly more importantly, yet another policy, another tool, another talking point to divide America.
Yep. And they take that little bit of truth that it is unfair, which is true. I do think for a lot of people, it's an unfair policy. People who have paid their loans off or who didn't take loans and work through school, or people whose parents even worked harder, you know, to pay for their school if they had that opportunity. That is unfair. That is a true thing. But then they take it and they manipulate it into this, it is you versus your fellow American. It's you versus them. It's like the only us versus them is American citizens against the state. You know, we don't take your aggression out on your fellow American. And I think it has I think I see a lot of Republicans doing it, and I don't think that's the right strategy at all. We should be talking about how we can cut costs for schools, how these loans are actually driving up tuition costs, how that the worst part about this forgiveness policy is not actually the price tag, but how it doesn't do anything to fix the problem. It'll actually probably drive up the cost of tuition, and the government has no plan to rein in how much money they're backing for loans. They're just going to keep driving it up, and it's going to be a crisis again.
Well, Democrats are not in business to fix problems. They're in business to create problems, so that way it'll lead to their political job security. That's what it really boils down to. And to your point, it doesn't address the root cause of the problem, which is twofold. One, the price of education and the lack of value that it creates. And the thing is, if people say that, you know what, it's not fair because some people paid back their loans. Democrats will only use that to support their talking points. Well, you paid it back. Why? Because you were fortunate enough to have the wherewithal, to have the opportunities to pay it back. They will never underscore the sacrifice that you've made and the responsible decisions that you made to handle your obligation. They would never give you credit or merit for that. They'll just demonize you by saying you were afforded the opportunity to be positioned to pay it back while others have not. That's the reason why we need to do this to fix the inequities, right? So again, they'll use words and use things to spin it to support their narrative that will only cause a greater divide.
Yeah, completely agree. So I always say, you know, when there's a new policy, you should ask yourself at least 3 reasons why the person proposing that or opposing it, why would they do that? Why is this in there?
There's no reason why any college should be, for any degree, or maybe the high professional ones, right? But generally, no college or university should be charging $60,000 to $75,000 per semester.
Oh yeah.
You're already in the hole after 1 year.
Well, it's so unfortunate because government and all of these universities, both private and public, but I think it's especially bad on the public side because that used to be the affordable alternative, that you could go to a state college and it would be cheaper. It's not anymore. It's super expensive to go to state college because the government has backed loans, and these college administrators are like, they're just backing whatever we say it costs. Right. They're going to pay. And it's like free money to them because they don't care about that student having to pay loans for 30 years.
It's free money and price gouging.
Yeah, and I think if Joe Biden had come out and said, we're going to give everyone $10,000, also we're not backing loans that are more than, $10,000 per semester. I can guarantee that a bunch of universities would immediately drop their prices because they do
possibly the state or local municipality like CUNY and SUNY that we have here in New York, I could see them possibly making some adjustments. You know, the elite schools and some of the mid-tier schools probably won't do it or do it as quickly, but I think that would have some effect in the local schools, so to speak. But we have to do something, right? You know, I'm a free market person, so I struggle with the idea of government stepping in and implementing price controls, but something has to be done. And I don't think the people realize that it's academia that are the villains here.
Oh, absolutely. But I do think, you know, we don't have to say, hey, University of Nevada, you can only charge this much per credit. But the government could say, I'm not backing loans for your school that are going to be
subsidizing.
Yeah, I'm not subsidizing $600 credits. When I went to State College for undergrad. When I went, it was $111 per credit. And right now it is like 700 and something. And I don't really think, you know, it's been 10 years since I went to college. It's been a while, but I don't really think that you've increased the worth of that degree by, you know.
Well, $700 a credit is pretty good.
Oh yeah, I mean, the state schools and we're a land grant school. We're supposed to be the most affordable in the.
Even $1,000 per credit is a good deal compared to some of these colleges, right? Because that's only like what, 15,000 a semester, 30,000 a year. Some of these academic institutions charge 60, 75,000.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And that's actually, you know, I think the prices go up too because they charge so much for room and board, and then people add on that onto the loans.
But for a liberal arts degree?
Oh yeah, it's crazy. And I say that, you know,
oh my goodness.
I'm not going to take personal offense to how many times conservatives have called out losers with liberal arts degrees, because I have 2 of those. I have 2 bachelor's.
But you're doing something with it though, right?
I mean, yeah, I have a bachelor's in political science and a bachelor's in history, and I have a master's of art. So
you should write a book. It might be a bestseller, right? Because the thing is, a lot of people, they don't know how to get a return on their degree. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, well, yes. And these universities don't particularly care about it. And if it was a free market thing, eventually people would stop buying degrees that didn't make them money. But since you're not buying it, you're borrowing for it, you don't feel that immediate impact, you don't feel that investment. It's not a free market.
Yeah, they're buying it on credit.
Yeah. But I think it's so important to talk about why this, like you said, Democrats are not creating a solution here. They're trying to buy some time, buy some votes. Just in time, like you said, we're about 80 something days out from election day, and he did this very purposely in this time frame because Democrats are about to be slaughtered in these midterm elections.
Right.
And he's hoping
they needed more than one thing, right? They're hanging their hats on Roe versus Wade, right? But that's not enough to eclipse, you know, the price at the pump, price at the grocery store, prices everywhere, right? And it also is not enough. They know at the end of the 3rd quarter, right? There'll be 3 quarters of no economic growth, and they know that there'll be likely a decline in employment, meaning that unemployment will actually start ticking higher. We already hear that from Walmart. We hear in terms of slowdown in sales. We hear that from Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan Chase. So there's a lot of companies in a lot of different sectors that are already letting people know. And when you look at what Powell said today, there's going to be pain going forward. They already know what the 3rd quarter will look like. So they need something else besides Roe versus Wade, right, to talk about as a distraction.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point too, because Powell did say today that, you know, we're going to have to deal with some pain. This economy, basically, it's going to get worse before it gets better, which I think everyone acknowledges at this point. I know we've, you know, the media.
Well, let's use the right word.
Yeah.
Right? Let's use Biden's word, the Democrats' word. We're in transition.
Of course. But I think that makes this student loan thing even a bigger deal. And I think that we've talked a little bit about, not just us, but just conservative media in general has talked about how this is a wealth transfer and how it affects lower class Americans, which I think is a fair point because most of the debt is middle to upper class Americans have the student debt. But for those lower class Americans that Biden really wants to make sure turn out because they're going to be brutally abused by his terrible economy, they probably have less than $10,000 in student debt. They have less student debt. So when you do something like this, Biden does come out, he probably wiped out their entire student debt with one swipe of a pen. For like bougie idiots like me who have a gajillion dollars in student debt, 10,000 is not really making a dent in what I've got left to pay the government. So it doesn't really affect me, but I think that the people that are struggling the most in Biden's economy that might be Biden voters that are just not for him right now are going to feel like, oh, this guy did something for me, because there is a disparate impact there. And I think it's a little too nuanced for some shorter form media than ours, but it's true. He just like handed it to him. He bought a vote.
True. But here's the situation. There are a hell of a lot more voters who did not go to college, who are not registered to vote, who probably never ever voted, who are sick and tired of being sick and tired of paying the price at the pump, even despite the fact that it's come down a little, still is high, right? And the grocery store and all these other issues that are compounding daily, they're frustrated. Then on top of it, they have to live with the threat of possibly losing their job, or already will lose their job between now and election day. I think that's a huge opportunity for the right to say that Build Back Better is not working out for us.
I completely agree. I think that's why we're seeing these desperate attempts by the Biden administration to make up some lost ground. I don't think it's going to be worth it. He tried. What I also think is funny is conservatives are outraged by the student loan plan, but I think Democrats are just as mad. They wanted it forgiven, all of it. They're really mad. So how do you make every single person? How do you make every single person mad? Just forgive a little bit of the debt. Then no one likes you. Liberals are mad that it wasn't enough. Conservatives think $0, $1 is too much, and now everyone's mad. I don't think it had the effect that he wanted, except that the few people who are turning on each other.
Well, Nancy Pelosi's pissed right now.
Yeah.
Because that clip of her saying that the president has no authority to do any of this, now she has to eat those words. Oh yeah,
it's hilarious. Like I said, they always pretend video doesn't exist. Like we're not going to find that. Exactly. What's unfortunate, I would constitutionally, I would think that Biden has zero authority to do this. Unfortunately, Congress has kind of neutered itself over the last 2 decades, forfeiting power over to the executive branch, allowing them to set their own huge budgets in these agencies and distribute funds as they wish, which led to this whole crisis that Biden is pretending to solve. And I just think sometimes I see even conservative reps express outrage about how the Department of Education is handling this. And I think, yeah, you probably shouldn't have let them have so much authority. You were not supposed to give your constitutional authority to regulate and to distribute funds. You're not supposed to give that to the executive branch because they might do this with zero accountability. And now you're seeing the terrible consequence of that, and they kind of care because this policy is unpopular, but they didn't care soon enough to stop it.
Well, the Democrats want to change the Constitution anyway, right? Because, the president should have power to wipe out everyone's debt, right? So the people, to your point, who are dissatisfied with the fact that Biden only did a little, because they want him to wipe it out in its entirety, that just feeds into their crazy narrative to rewrite the Constitution and restructure the checks and balances between, the three branches of government. These people are crazy.
Yeah. I just think if they happen to get away with student loan forgiveness, then they basically did rewrite the Constitution. They just didn't have to go through the process. Sure. You took the legislators out of it, and I think we've seen that happen too many times where it's on paper, not allowed, no authority.
And they didn't rewrite it. They just blue line edited.
Yeah, they reimagined it, reinterpreted. And I think that's a huge problem with the executive regulation, but it just happens to be this problem on both sides for this particular issue, which I think is funny.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But so much news this week. I was trying to find a fun story, and I watched a clip of Hillary Clinton's new show on Apple TV, and it was about 1 minute and 30 seconds long, and I think that was 1 minute and 27 seconds too long for me.
I didn't even know she had a show.
Yeah. So I'm not saying anything bad about Apple, and I would love if Apple TV would sponsor us, but I've never watched Apple TV. I don't know what the demographic is. I don't know anyone who does Apple TV, but her show is on Apple TV. It's called Gutsy, and it has to be the most cringy thing I've ever seen. It's also a little too late because I feel like they're trying to do this thing where, like, Hillary Clinton, she's so fun. She's so relatable. Like, she's just like your fun mom, except that everyone knows who she is, and you can't reinvent somebody that literally everyone knows. And I don't think they like her, so I don't think it's going to go well. The first show, she has a buzzer competition.
Didn't I don't know who it is. Oh, which station? Was it HBO or Netflix? Maybe it was Netflix that canceled Michelle Obama's show.
Yeah, or was it Spotify?
Or Spotify? Somebody canceled Michelle Obama. So let's see if Hillary could, how long Hillary will last on Apple TV.
Yeah. Oh, seriously. Michelle Obama at least has a cult following. She's a polarizing figure, but I feel like there are Michelle Obama stans, and I don't know any Hillary ones left. She's also, getting pretty old. She's never been very likable, so it gets a little more sad and more desperate.
But she doesn't give up.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
She's almost like COVID, right? she just comes back in a different variant.
Everyone survives her, and she keeps coming back. Yeah, I saw a clip. It's like her and Chelsea. So maybe that's the play. They're trying to put Chelsea Clinton more in the spotlight, which doomed to fail. So please put her out there more. But
Chelsea Clinton has as much charisma as a wet napkin.
Yeah. But I saw a clip where Hillary Clinton played a game with Kim Kardashian, where they had a buzzer and they had to weigh in on the law and see who could answer first. And Hillary lost. Kim Kardashian beat her. And the clip just Chelsea Clinton being like, I think you did good, Mom. I think that you just need to be faster at the buzzer. Don't worry, you didn't lose. And I was like, how afraid of her mom is Chelsea Clinton to this day? She's like, Mom, you actually won. It's totally fine. You didn't lose. Don't lose it. I relate personally.
Well, Hillary's good at taking losses.
It was Russia's fault. If Russia didn't interfere with Kim Kardashian's buzzer, she never would have won.
That's true.
That's what we'll be hearing soon.
They sent out a signal.
Yeah. But I don't know how many episodes this show is signed for, but I will guess that everyone will stop caring about it literally immediately. I feel really safe in that prediction.
I don't know. We'll see. Let's keep an eye out on the producers.
Yeah.
We don't want them to vanish.
Yes. We'll keep them in our prayers, and hopefully they won't stop tweeting anytime soon. But I'm going to give that first episode a watch so that I can ruthlessly say very mean things about it for a day.
Hey, you know what? Let's give it some credit, right? Sometimes it's not easy to fall asleep, especially during a hot summer. you know, when you're struggling to go to sleep instead of popping a sleeping pill, just turn on Apple TV and Clinton's show, right? Put you to sleep.
It's a great advertisement, John. Maybe they'll hire you. It sounds like a risky job, but you could. It sounds like you're doing a great job.
It'll get a lot of eyeballs for about 10 minutes.
Perfect. It's like CNN in an airport. Captive audience. But that is all I had this week, and we will see you next week. Discuss some more fun issues. Getting great. Closer to election day. More stories all the time.
Cool.
Yeah.